So you want a project car, but you probably don't know anyone that is into cars, or you may have bought a few project cars in the past and they probably ended up in your garage, untouched, unfixed, probably not running. And you're probably wondering, how can I get into cars if I don't know anyone who is into cars? How do I start myself with my first project car and have fun with cars like how you're supposed to? In this video, I'm going to tell you how I did it and how I enjoy driving cars and have fun fixing and learning about cars, experiencing different cars, and honestly enjoying JDM cars the way I feel like everyone should. So in this video, I'm gonna help you guys out. What is up guys, Mikey from JDM Icon here. Welcome back to another video. If you guys are new, make sure to subscribe down below as we upload videos talking about 350Zs and anything JDM. We also have builds on our S13, R32 Skyline, and our two Evo 10s that you can follow up on if you subscribe and check out the channel down below. Welcome to my room. So before even looking for a car and picking out the perfect project car for you, there's a few things that you should consider before even doing that. And I feel a lot of people give up on having a project car and getting into cars in the first place because they don't consider these things. One is obviously to know your limitations as a mechanic, as a car enthusiast, and as a person. One thing to consider is your mechanical knowledge. Do you know how to do brakes on a car? Have you changed struts before? Have you maybe changed some suspension parts? Have you done an engine overhaul? Or maybe you've never even worked or touched a car before. And that's completely okay. Things like that play a huge factor when you own a project car. And yes, a lot of us want to own a project car because we want to learn, but you don't want to get a car that's too much for you to handle and end up losing motivation to even work on the car, because it has happened to a lot of us. And especially if you're in the position that you don't have a lot of friends that are into cars, you should really be careful with what car you end up buying. Second thing to consider is the mileage and the kilometers. Depending on where you're from, I'm from Canada, all our cars are measured in kilometers, as opposed to the States, you guys are probably measured in miles. When you buy a car brand new, it has 0 kilometers, 0 miles. The more someone uses it, the more someone drives it, the more wear and tear. It's always better to look for a lower mileage car, because usually the resale value on those cars are a little bit better. With lower mileage cars, there's just a lesser chance of mechanical failure and just failure in general, and things that need to be replaced on the car because of the lower mileage. It probably hasn't been driven so much, it's been probably parked, and when the car is parked, things don't usually go wrong, if that makes sense. So that's something to consider when buying a car. Me personally, I always look for lower mileage. I think lower mileage is better, and obviously when you check out the car in person, you'll be able to see if the mileage is true to the car or not, because there are some sketchy people out there and you don't want to make a deal with those types of people. 3 is always check the title. Now, I have had rebuilt title cars. Rebuilt meaning the car was maybe stolen in an accident, or maybe it was in a flood. Flood being the biggest thing. Stay away from any flood damaged cars. You don't want any of your electronics, especially with the cars nowadays. There's so much electronics in cars. If water gets in and screws up with a lot of the electronics, like the ECU, the car's never really the same after that. Although there are some cars that are rebuilt that have gotten into accidents and have been rebuilt properly, and those cars are still okay. So rebuilt cars aren't a solid no, but clean titles are always better. And if the car doesn't have a title, don't buy it. Unless you just want a race car, because if it doesn't have a title, you can't actually drive the car on the street. Another huge thing with titles is to check if the information on that specific title is correct, because sometimes people like to play around with the model and the year of the car, especially with some imported cars and even some domestic cars as well. It's really important to make sure that the title, the engine, the displacement, and even the amount of cylinders is correct on the title before you buy the car. If it's a V8, it should say it's a V8 on there. If it's an inline 6, it should say it's an inline 6 on the title. And the fourth thing is kind of a no-brainer, but I feel like I should put this on the list just in case you're really new into buying a project car, is have tools. Now obviously buying a car is the fun part. Working on it, that's when the fun could fade away and get really frustrating, but that's all part of loving this passion for cars that we all have. If you're dealing with Japanese cars, it's good to have at least a metric socket, ratchet, and wrench set, screwdrivers, a multimeter, obviously a floor jack, and some jack stands to help you out with whatever you're doing. So 3 things to consider when buying a car is price, the availability on parts, and the community. I usually like to say anything between like the $10,000 range is pretty good to buy a car in. You can buy, there's tons of choices out there, and most of the cars that are 10 grand are in decent condition. Now once you dip down to like the $5,000 range, you're gonna start getting cars that have a lot more issues, maybe rebuilt titles, maybe it needs an engine overhaul, maybe all the struts and suspension is blown. A lot of the time, lots of people buy a really cheap car that needs a lot of work because they think it's a good deal. Although it could be if you are mechanically inclined and you have a lot of experience with working on cars and you already have connections and where to get cheaper parts and stuff like that. If you're less experienced and you want to buy a certain car, maybe it's a better option for you to buy the more expensive car that is in better shape and doesn't need a whole lot of work, as opposed to you buying the cheaper car, having a lot more work and end up paying mechanics to fix the car, paying extra on parts and maybe even body work and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, you want to be able to drive the car and enjoy your project car just like the rest of us are. Now parts to me is a little bit of a touchy subject because you can obviously buy tons of parts online for any car and most of the time it is readily available. Let's just say you want to get the part pretty quickly and you don't want to wait a few weeks to get the part in. And the only place you can really go to get parts is like a local auto parts store. Stores like that would most likely stock parts for cars that are popular on the road. Alright, so now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and look for a car. Now there are a few places you can actually look to buy cars. One being Facebook Marketplace and Kijiji or Craigslist. Okay, so an awesome project car is a car that obviously I'm a little biased, but let's look for a 350Z. Okay, so there's a lot of them within the $10,000 range. Oh, there's an RX-8. Unfortunately, this car is already sold. It's pending pickup. But let's just say you run into a car like this. It's a 2003 Nissan 350Z. The guy's asking $7,500 for it. It has about 151,000 kilometers, which isn't too bad. Still something to consider for the price. And it's a manual transmission, which is something I personally love. If you guys are considering buying an automatic or want to know the difference between a manual and automatic, specifically on a 350Z, check out my video over here as I compare my mom's automatic 350Z and my manual 350Z. It drives amazing, in immaculate condition for a 19-year-old car. Priced at what I got it for 3 years ago. It's actually a pretty cheap price for 350Zs because they have went up in price. He did say it's a clean title. The car looks pretty decent from the pictures. It's a little dark, so it's hard to tell. This is a car I would highly recommend you guys check out if this is like a first car. Again, it's a little bit higher in terms of price. It is closer to the $10,000 range. Again, checking out the car in person, that's when you'll really be able to tell whether it's the right car for you or not. This is something closer to what you can get for your first project car. If things it might need for safety, maybe pretty minor things. Again, you're gonna have to check out the car in person for sure, but things that might need is brakes, maybe some suspension, some ball joints here and there, maybe wheel bearing, mainly suspension stuff. But from the looks of the car, it has been taken care of pretty well, and if this car was still available, I would probably take a look at it. Let's go ahead and look at a car that isn't a good idea to buy. It's a pretty cool car, but I would stay away from this. I would stay away from it. It's not Japanese though. Okay, so it's a 2003 Jaguar X-Type. Again, this is more of a grandpa car. It's not exactly a JDM car, but this is a type of car that I would personally stay away from. Although the mileage is low, it only has 92,000 kilometers for a car from 2003, which is like a 19-year-old car. That's pretty good. It's really low mileage. Because it's a Jaguar, there's probably no parts for it. You can probably get parts online, but it's most likely harder on parts and it's just difficult to work on. And the second thing is the community. There probably isn't a strong community behind this Jaguar X-Type. If you need any help with certain issues, there probably isn't a lot of people to help you out because again, it's not a car that has a big cult following like even a Honda Civic or an Integra, an S2000, I just named 3 Hondas, Nissan Z chassis, the S chassis, Skylines, Subarus, Evos, Supras. Those are all cars that have a huge following. And obviously some of the cars that I named may not be in your price range, but a Mazda Miata might be, and maybe if you can find an S13. Cars like that have a huge following, and the people within those communities are most likely willing to help you out with whatever question or issue you have because they probably have been in that position before and it probably took them days or maybe weeks to figure out. A lot of people out there are willing to help new car enthusiasts get into the car scene because honestly, the car scene is like a huge family and it's really awesome to get into a community like this and meet new people, make some friends, and just share the passion about cars. Alright, so now that you've found a car, let's go ahead and talk about the things that you should actually do when looking at the car. So you might be thinking to yourself, how can I go about buying this car I just found online? well, call them up and see when's a time that works for you and the other person, and check out the car. A good place to meet up is a restaurant, maybe like a McDonald's place in between you guys, and a popular place to actually check out cars is a police station, because if the guy is sketchy and doesn't want to meet at a police station, you probably should stay away from the dude in general and that car, no matter how good the car is. And if you're the type of person to make a checklist, you can go ahead and make a checklist. There's tons of information online as well as to certain things you should check out on cars. Tires is one thing. Are they cracked? Are they weathered? Cracks on the sidewall most likely indicates the car has been sitting for a long time and hasn't been driven, and the car was probably sitting on a flat tire that could cause the sidewall to crack. Also, just older tires in general most of the time has cracks along the treads or on the sidewall as well, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but again, that's another expense you'd have to pay on top of the car if you do go ahead and buy it. And obviously, if you don't know anything about suspension, it could be almost useless to look underneath the car and really check. Although some things you can look for underneath the car is things like rust. You should stay away from cars with a lot of rust, because that is a whole new different ball game. Little rust is all right. Most cars do have a little bit of rust here and there, especially if you're looking at a car from the 90s or early 2000s. It's a given. Rust is gonna be there. You should look on some key points where you feel like rust shouldn't form, like maybe the floor of the car. That's really important. If the exhaust rusts, that's usually okay, because an exhaust is just a pipe anyways. If there's a hole in the exhaust, you can most likely cut it out and then put in a new pipe, or maybe get an aftermarket exhaust later down the road. And then once you get inside the interior, check out the interior. Does everything work? Don't be afraid to like really press on all the buttons. Check that if the fan works, the AC works, the climate control, check everything in the interior and make sure it all works fine. The next few things on the list is honestly up to you guys. Is there things that you care more or less about? Maybe the seats you don't really care so much about because you have plans on changing the seats anyways. Or maybe the steering wheel is all gross looking and worn out, but you have an aftermarket steering wheel at home. Those are things that you can consider while you're looking at the car. And another huge thing is dents and paint. A lot of us aren't body men. And body work is really, really expensive. And unless you know someone that is a body man, body work can be really, really scary for a lot of us, because a lot of the time to pull or fill a dent, you're gonna have to bring the car's paint down to bare metal. And if you don't do it and seal it right, instead of fixing it, you can actually cause the car to rust even more later down the road. So it's really important that you guys are careful and have a general idea of what you're getting yourself into before you actually give the other person your money and take his car. And then once you check out the car and you feel like it's the right car for you and it's within your limitations and budget, go ahead and talk to the owner about price. Most likely you guys can work something out, and don't be shy to ask questions about the car. Don't be the type of person to lowball people who are selling cars. Just like that 350Z, if he's asking $7,500, don't offer $4,000 for the car, because you're most likely going to insult the owner of the car and he's probably going to get really mad at you, and you don't want to be in that situation. So to sum things up, look for a car that suits your automotive knowledge and experience. And even if you're willing to learn, remember that some jobs can be a lot bigger than others. And if you're anything like me, you want to spend more time driving and enjoying the car, taking it to car meets, meeting new people, and making memories with the car, as opposed to it being in your garage or on your driveway, not running and broken. I hope this video helped a lot of you guys open your eyes and realize that cars can be really scary, but it's also really fun if you do things the right way. And hopefully I inspired some of you guys to go out there, buy some cars, buy a car, work on it, and hopefully I get to see you guys on the road. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.